Thank you, David. Mayor Gallego, we're ready to go.
All right. Let me just.
I should really.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I will now call this meeting to order. I'm excited to be joining you in my first meeting as the chair of the Transportation Policy Committee. I want to begin with a roll call of members.
Okay, Madam Chairwoman, I'll take roll call. Please indicate if you're present. Rock Arnett.
I am here.
Thank you. Mayor Barney.
You hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Binsbacher.
Here.
Doug DeCluson.
Here.
Mayor Giles.
Here.
Mayor Hall. Mayor Hall. Mayor Hartke.
I am here.
Councilmember Clapp.
Here.
Cheryl Lombard.
Here.
Mayor Lord.
Here.
Mayor Meck. Mayor Meck. Mayor Price.
Here.
Mark Reardon.
Here.
Supervisor Sellers.
Here.
Mayor Wires. Mayor Wires. Mayor Weiss.
Here.
And Chairwoman Gallego is present. We do have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you to everyone for joining us, and thank you to Chairman Wires for his service as chair. Reminder to remute your phone when you are not speaking. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. For this meeting, we did not receive any comments. I want to take a moment to recognize Jen Daniels for her service to the region as mayor of Gilbert and as a member of the Transportation Policy Committee. Also want to congratulate TPC members who won their recent elections, including Mayor Weiss, Mayor Wires, Mayor Giles, Mayor Hall, Mayor Price, Councilmember Binsbacher, and Supervisor. I think that's it.
Chairwoman Gallego, before we go on to the consent calendar, just wanted to mention that we did receive a public comment today, this morning, from a Mr. Walt Gray. His comments were received via email, and they will be included in the minutes for the meeting. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you to Mr. Gray for participating. We next move to item number 2, which is the approval of the consent agenda. Items 2A through 2C are on the consent agenda. Does any member of the TPC have any questions or would like a presentation on any of the consent agenda items? Could I have a motion to recommend approval of the consent agenda
So
item?
moved.
Second. By Mayor Hartke.
Any discussion of the motion? All right, Melissa, will you take a roll call?
Yes, Madam Chairwoman. Rock Arnett.
I approve.
Mayor Barney.
Yes, I.
Councilmember Binsbacher.
Aye.
Doug DeCluson.
Aye.
Mayor Giles.
Aye.
Mayor Hall. Mayor Hartke.
Aye.
Councilmember Clapp.
Aye.
Cheryl Lombard.
Aye.
Mayor Lord.
Aye.
Mayor Meck. Mayor Price.
Aye.
Mark Reardon,
Aye.
Supervisor Sellers,
Aye.
Mayor Wires,
Aye.
Mayor Weiss,
Aye.
and Chairwoman Gallego.
Aye.
Is there anyone I didn't call? Thank you.
Thank you. Item passes. Item 3 is an update on the development of a new regional transportation plan. Ms. Audra Kester Thomas will give this important update.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gallego, members of Transportation Policy Committee. It's great to be back with you after a short summer break to give you an update on the technical work associated with the development of the next regional transportation plan to inform an extension of Proposition 400. We've had several activities ongoing and are excited to provide you an update on this technical work. Next slide. First, I'm going to start off by providing a bit of an overview of our performance-based evaluation framework. Next slide. And specifically focusing on really what's ahead of us for this next upcoming 6 months. Specifically, how we go from a large regional needs catalog to a fiscally constrained investment portfolio. While we'll rely heavily on some technical work, I do want to walk through each of these steps with you today, as we have with our managers already, to better outline this overall process. We'll also provide some of the initial feedback that we have received from our managers on these technical elements. But let's first start with the plan's vision and goals. Next slide. Simply put, our intent is to establish a sustainable, resilient, multimodal transportation investment program that connects people with opportunities to prosper and thrive. We've identified 6 goals in order to achieve this. Next slide. Safety for all users, prosperity, responsiveness, livability, preservation, and mobility. These are the key tenets for which we build evaluation criteria and ultimately measure our outcomes with different suites or scenarios that we will play out comprised of different projects and different programs for evaluation. Next slide. This is the overall performance-based process. You'll see we start with a large needs catalog. In our case, this comprises about 1,300 different project and program ideas that were submitted by our member agencies, but also regionally identified needs and studied projects over the course of the last 10 years or so, as well as all those projects that have been deferred out of our funded Proposition 400 program due to the Great Recession. I'll take you through each of these steps to better demonstrate how we narrow with each step down to a fiscally constrained budgeted project list. Next slide. Our first step is applying our regional significance definitions against the needs catalog. We will sort out projects that will be individually evaluated and given a technical score. These are our larger key modal program projects, largely capital in nature, that will ultimately be technically evaluated against several criteria. We'll sort those away from bundles of smaller projects and ideas that, when combined, could potentially develop into new funded programs. Next slide. For those regionally significant projects, those large capital focused projects, evaluation criteria will be developed and used to help identify the highest performing projects. As we've already noted, we have significant more need in this region than available funding, and so this is really important to identifying our highest performing projects. At this step, our larger projects will be evaluated within the 3 principal modal categories. In other words, freeway and highway projects will be evaluated against freeway and highway projects, arterial projects against each other, and then ultimately high capacity transit projects against each other. Next slide. This isn't an unfamiliar process. We apply this actually now as part of our set aside programs already established here at MAG under Proposition 400. It's also a practice that has become widely used in other regions and MPOs as they develop a required performance-based plans. Here in this slide, you'll see an example from last year's, I think, active transportation call for projects. And you'll see projects scored against technical criteria, falling above and below a line. Next slide. Step 3, we step back and we identify and make sure that the technical process and reviewing different projects hasn't left out an important project that ultimately delivers on a regional priority or something unique to this region. It's our gut check, if you will, where we make sure that we're advancing a portfolio of projects that is representative of our desired outcomes. Next slide. Step 4, we apply different funding scenarios to these now narrowed projects and programs, testing which packages deliver what outcomes, seeing how resilient those different scenarios or packages are to future unknowns or different policy decisions. Notably, at this stage, we'll be able to identify the kinds of projects and programs we would deliver at different funding scenarios, whether it's a continuation of our half-cent sales tax or a different amount associated with that sales tax or alternative revenue solutions. Next slide. So I wanted to also highlight some of the specific feedback we've already received from our managers as we've reviewed these elements with them this summer. Next slide. In July, we focused on some of the evaluative pieces highlighted here within our process. Next slide. And used our management committee work group to dive deeper into some of these elements. We specifically focused on receiving feedback around how we should evaluate those big projects and what uncertainties or policies we wanted to test in our trade-off analysis. This work ultimately included some homework assignments. We've included those within your agenda packet today for your own interest and observation and feedback. Next slide. Some key takeaways that we've already received is that the 6 goals that we have identified are on target. And while mobility, safety, and prosperity seem to have been identified as maybe more important by some, at the end of the day, several of our managers had weighted all of the priorities, or excuse me, all of the goals the same. Ultimately, what this tells us is that each of those goals have more applicability when evaluating against certain modal projects. And so weighting goals within modal evaluation categories probably is the best mechanism moving forward. The feedback we did get is that there's emphasis on specific priority outcomes within these 3 modal categories, for which in the subsequent slides, I will be providing that feedback. Next slide. So looking at the freeway and highway project evaluation framework, feedback we have gotten here says that connecting to existing and future employment is really important, as well as ensuring those projects are relieving bottlenecks or known areas of congestion. Additional feedback we have received indicated acknowledgement of connecting to future residential growth, being able to potentially accommodate multimodal solutions, ensuring that we're recognizing connecting activity centers. When considering weighting, perhaps more on mobility, safety, and prosperity when evaluating freeway and highway projects makes more sense. Next slide. In considering our arterial project evaluation, safety seems to come to the top of the list. Definitely identifying projects that will be able to address known crash history areas. We also received feedback again in the importance of connecting future and existing employment. Other considerations were for complete streets, underscoring the importance of our bicycle and pedestrian considerations, as well as recognizing future growth. In terms of weighting projects, again, we see a lot of importance to safety, mobility, and prosperity. But feedback here also in our arterial projects recognize the importance of considering arterial preservation and maintenance needs in addition to expanding our grid network. Next slide. When reviewing high capacity transit projects, we heard loud and clear from the feedback the importance of ridership potential. It's certainly unique in terms of considering different multimodal options and anchoring to the highest propensity for carrying the highest amount of ridership and being the most efficient solution. We do continue to coordinate with our partners at Valley Metro, and so far, feedback we have been receiving is heading in the right direction and in line with this focus. Next slide. We received other feedback, and I wanted to note specifically to the livability goal. We received strong support for applying the livability goal and application of evaluating future regional programs. Of note, strong support for our active transportation commitment, as well as air quality programming. We also received more detailed feedback applicable to later stages of our process. Regarding the program and project evaluation and validation stage, or step 3, we received some other ideas that I wanted to share, including considering whether or not the composition of investments have balance across the region, potentially considering giving historic or legacy projects extra consideration or priority, and considering opportunities for jurisdictions to identify their highest priorities. Regarding our scenario planning and trade-off analysis, we received feedback of considering whether or not candidate high-capacity transit projects are identified in local plans and have existing local funding commitments. We also were suggested to consider alternative funding options, such as leveraging private sector investment to better enable delivery of projects. Next slide. Regarding implementation, we received some longer-term feedback, including that emphasis on the need for flexibility in programming and being able to adapt and respond to change. We see this as an opportunity to emphasize the importance to consider future programs funded with iterative calls for projects. Regarding project development, we received several suggestions that would better tie to project scopes once we ultimately implement a program several years from now. Some of those ideas included considering secondary impacts of some of our larger construction projects onto additional or tertiary infrastructure, recognizing the integratedness of first and last mile solutions to some of our high capacity transit projects in particular, and then considering other regional considerations to project scopes, such as wrong way drivers, or are there other safety countermeasures that we want to embed in project scopes to ensure these regional priorities are met. Regarding the preservation goal, while it certainly doesn't weigh as high as some of the others based on the feedback we received to date, it is an important regional consideration, and it especially reflects the diverse needs of our large region and the different development patterns and levels of maturity across the region. We expect preservation, level of maintenance of infrastructure to be a robust conversation, and whether or not it becomes a regional priority to fund in programming. Next slide. So I wanted to highlight a few of our next steps before we open it up to hear from you and your observations. Next slide. First and foremost, we're really happy to announce the launching of our Momentum website. We encourage you to share this with your constituencies, encourage building out of our social media audiences. We have specific emphasis on this in part because of our now heavy reliance on a virtual setting, not only to connect with our public, but to leverage opportunities for feedback. As I indicated earlier this year, we have built out this portfolio to engage the public in different ways, to be able to host virtual meetings, to have surveys or questions for which the public to respond to. So I would encourage and hope for your partnership in building our audience and following online. If you need additional resources, we stand ready to help in this endeavor. Next slide. But I want to leave you with the following. We have several key deliverables coming up here at the beginning of September. First and foremost is our peer region analysis. This is a comparative analysis of peer regions across the country, where in addition to several other things, we outline a per capita investment relative to other regions and that comparative analysis for your insight. We'll also be delivering the regional needs catalog, and we'll have applied a draft test of our regional significance definitions. We'll be sorting out the potential projects to be evaluated in a technical setting from the collections of other projects that, when bundled together, may be viable for future programmatic funding. We will be seeking and needing your direction at this stage in particular to identify which potential programs are regional priorities. Is funding for pavement preservation a priority? Is funding for commuter rail a regional priority? Is funding for emerging technologies and setting that aside for future investment a priority? Is public art and landscape a regional priority? We have dozens of these that we'll be seeking your feedback on. And from MAG's perspective, some of the most fundamental questions that lie ahead of us revolve around the future of regional transit and how we want and what we desire for regional transit here. We've targeted a conversation to initiate in late September about our approach to a future bus network and the role of the region and local communities in funding transit. I'll also draw your attention that in response to several questions that we have received over the months, we produced a second memo that's included in your agenda packet today that outlines some history and responsibilities associated to regional transit planning and policy decisions, for which I'll just draw your attention to. We hope this will help provide some clarity to this topic. But now I have concluded my presentation today. I would like to turn it back to Chairwoman Gallego to open it up to get your feedback and answer any questions that you might have.
Wonderful, thank you. It's really an exciting time for our region and just talking about how we can continue to grow and have a strong, sustainable future in America's fastest growing county. So thank you for your work on this, and really appreciate the work that the management committee has been doing as well, including to define what regional priorities are, since this is a regional tax. And I'm wondering if the next step is not also to talk about roles and responsibility with other levels of government. So if we are helping to fund a project and ADOT is helping to build it, ongoing maintenance and repairs, landscaping, what are some of the roles that each level of government should be taking the lead on?
Yeah, Mayor Gallego, I think that's a really good point. As we move forward in the future, last fall we rolled out our analysis of the long-term maintenance needs on our highway system, and the response, and that traditionally has been a state level responsibility paid for out of the Arizona Highway User Revenue Fund. But as I'm sure you and the committee members know, that the gas tax in Arizona hasn't changed since 1991, neither, and the federal gas tax hasn't changed since 93. Consequently, ADOT really has some financial constraints. And so even some of the internal discussions is, if the region continues to build and improve highways, is there going to be money there to maintain? Obviously maintain the basic structure of the highway as well as the safety improvements. So it's really an important question that we have to make sure we keep it on the table. Part of the peer region analysis is looking at kind of how other regions deal with this. And I think universally the highway systems are maintained typically at the state level. So a lot of information coming forward. While I have the floor, I just wanted to emphasize the work that's ahead of this committee, as well as the Management Committee and Regional Council in September, October, November. We're going to be engaging in kind of the heart of their planning, the planning exercise now. And one of the questions we continue to get, and it's there on this slide, document the policy questions. There's a lot of concern, when are we going to start talking about kind of the policy questions? Well, the policy questions really are throughout our planning effort. And so we're putting together a document that takes different policy questions and lays that into our planning framework. And so you should be able to figure out kind of where in the planning process certain policy questions going to be dealt with. The major one, obviously, it's on everybody's mind is, other than when are we going to go to the vote, the ballot is what's that question going to be in terms of the rate and term of the extension. That really depends on kind of where we end up on this trade-off analysis. And that chart that Audra showed on our RTP project and program evaluation steps 2, 3, and 4 in particular, that's the trade-off analysis. And so that will clearly show that, for example, if the policy makers want to say, well, what happens if we just stick with a half cent? What can we get done in this region? We'll be able to provide that answer. And at the same time, if someone says, well, let's look at a penny or something in between or more, then what is it that the region can fund relative to transportation investments, and what does that mean in terms of the quality of our transportation system moving forward? I will say this pure region analysis that we'll be getting out fairly soon will show that despite what I had thought, that this region was in the top tier of transportation investments for metro areas around the country, we are not. And clearly we were when we started this program in 85, and probably was still the case in 2004. But today, our peer regions around the country really have stepped up their regional investments in transportation. And so I'll just leave it at that. When that document comes out, I think that's something that you'll really need to pay some attention to. And obviously, all of our efforts here, at the same time, we're continuing to work to try to increase revenues from other sources like the state, as well as the federal government. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Members of the committee, questions?
So I have a question. This is Kevin Hartke from Chandler. So
go ahead, Mayor.
Eric, thank you. Eric, you had mentioned a document coming that will kind of start the process and around the policies. When do you hope to get that out to us, please?
Well, as I said, the document, we reviewed it yesterday. We've sent it out to the management committee work group and managers for them to take a look at. We're starting with them because they really gave us the initial list of policy questions. So we want to make sure they have an opportunity to review and from their perspective. So I think a week or so, we should be in a position to get something out to the members on this. We have two different documents on this. One is basically a list of policy questions and kind of a narrative description of each one. And then there's another document that takes those same policy questions and lays it into these evaluation steps. And so you can see where in the process those questions might be addressed. But I do want to emphasize that, unlike some planning processes, which are very linear, you go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. When we're doing this kind of planning work, it is not. It's just not linear like that. It's very iterative. And so, for example, as we get into these different scenarios and trade-off analysis, there's a number of feedbacks we're going to have to do. Well, what happens if we fund these kind of projects or these kind of projects? We're always looking for a couple of things. One, are these projects improving our regional transportation system and the mobility of our citizens? But two, we also have to make sure that whatever the investment package we end up with out of this planning process resonates with the voters, right? So at the end of the day, this work doesn't mean anything unless the voters say, yeah, we really like what you did, and we're going to support that through continuation of taxes. So once again, we have to keep our eye on the ball and make sure that what we end up with is something that works with the voters here too.
Well, I look forward. I agree. We've had kind of the presentation of policy questions in all of what Audra has presented to us, and I do look forward to kind of tying some of those down across our region here. And I agree. I think ultimately that, every voter has got to have a sense of tie-in with this, whether they live in Chandler or Surprise or Central Phoenix, that there's something that they feel that there's something in there for them that's going to make our voters across this great county vote for this thing. So I do look forward to participating and not just looking at the policy questions, but doing the policy answers and work on that in presentation. So thank you, Eric, and thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we understand that there's been some frustration among the managers as well as elected officials on when are we going to talk policy. Well, this process, it's almost impossible to talk about policy alone in isolation. You really have to take it in the context of the trade-offs, for example. And so once again, I think by the end of this process, by the end of this year, you'll probably be tired of talking about policy. But anyway, we'll look forward to those lot coming out here in the next over the next month in particular.
Yeah, this is Jack Sellers.
Go ahead, Supervisor.
And I certainly understand that finding the funding to invest for our future is probably the most critical issue that we're dealing with right now. But I also want to ensure that as we put together this plan, because it's a 20 to 25 year plan, we really are engaging the right people, talk about how do we become, we're looking at all the things that allow us to engage intelligent vehicles, transportation, planning.
Supervisor, you are going in and out on my audio.
Want me to start over?
Did others lose some audio? It looked like.
Same experience with me.
Okay. Yes, so if you could start over, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Can you hear me okay right now?
Yes.
I was saying other than funding to invest for our future, the most critical thing for me in putting together a 20 or 25 year really are engaging the right people, making this a smart region. They're looking at the advantages that we can gain, intelligent vehicles, intelligent transportation infrastructure. I know that's a very complicated topic, but I do want to ensure that long-term plan, we have the right people.
Yeah, Mayor, if Chair Gallego, if I could just, you were cutting out quite a bit right in the middle of it. I think your sense is, Jack, that you want to make sure that we're considering the advanced technologies, autonomous vehicles, and those sorts of things in terms of transportation moving forward, certainly.
Could we go back to the original 6 principles? It would be good to look at them to see if innovation is reflected in our values, or I want to, innovation is the word that comes to me to try to capture what Supervisor Sellers was saying, but.
Certainly. Craig, I think you're running the PowerPoint. If you would go back to, I believe it's slide maybe 3 or 4.
We have been in the region, I think, at the forefront of many new technologies, and MAG is doing great things as well with traffic control and technology.
Certainly, Mayor Gallego, Supervisor Sellers, members of TPC. If you'll go back one slide, you'll see here are 6 key goals, and in particular, a couple things I would point out here in responsiveness in particular, that we're accommodating future growth and are flexible to adapting to changing needs and innovations. I think that notably recognizes not only the difficulty and complexities as Supervisor Sellers has noted, but I can tell you in reviewing the variety of potential projects and program ideas that were submitted and are being considered and studied at MAG over the course of the 10 years, ITS solutions, emerging technology, you'll see this as a theme as we deliver the needs catalog. And I think it will be hard, we'd be hard pressed not to set aside funding for these kinds of future investments, even if we're not necessarily certain what those specific technologies are today. Even some basics in fiber technology continue to be an early investment this region has made with our regional network, but a continuation and certainly expressing the need to expand that network into the future. So Mayor Gallego, I think our responsiveness goal is intended to demonstrate that innovation is on the forefront for us, and that our programs and the projects that we identify need to be responsive to it as well.
It's hard to put a single word on these goals because to me, responsiveness doesn't fully capture, but then the description does as well.
Thank you.
But I don't know if we probably don't have room for. It's also with the livability goal. To me, livability and sustainability are different. And so I always wonder if we've picked the right word.
This is Mayor Lord.
Go ahead, Mayor Lord.
Thank you. As I look through this list, I get a little concerned. I hope the list is just a list, and it could be, we may put them in different order. I look at all of them, and to me, the most important one now is mobility, to move people and goods, because that's where we are in Arizona. We're a fast-growing state, industrial, you name it, we're there. And so, not that I don't believe in safety, but I think that comes with mobility, but we'll do it. I think prosperity comes with mobility. If we don't have mobility, our economic competitiveness is not going to be there. So I just look at that, and I'd like some emphasis on those things I talked about. We're responsive, that works with the other things we do. We're all very responsive to our growth and through mobility, and that's why it's so important. And we all believe in livability. To say sustained environment, I think you can look at our health industries. I think that the quality of our city, I mean, just through the cities alone, we're doing a great deal. So anyway, that's just my comments. Thank you for giving me the moment.
Thank you, Mayor Lord.
Madam Chair, it's Ken Weiss.
Go ahead, Mayor.
You know, just for, and I agree with Mayor Lord, especially when we talk about the West Valley and a lot of things happening in the East Valley when it comes to transportation and prosperity and moving freight. That being said, I also want to make sure, and it's not a conversation for today, but it's a conversation for the future of how legacy projects from Prop 400 that, because of financial reasons, were pushed back to 400 extension. What is the process for those? And just, I want to make sure that's part of the conversation. And again, it's not a conversation for today, but it is a conversation in the near-term future. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
This is Councilmember Binsbacher. I just want to say I agree with Mayor Lord's comments as well. I think everything she said makes great sense, and mobility does, emphasis on that does cover it all. And again, safety is always a top priority. So, you know, not sure how these are listed necessarily, but I think I just really agree with her comments. I just wanted to state that. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further comments, then we will move on to item number 4, which is a legislative update, and turn it back to our MAG Executive Director, Eric Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman Gallego. In Nathan's absence today, I'm going to step in and give you a quick update. Obviously, we're following a lot of activity at the federal level. Continues to be a lot of discussions about whether there's going to be another package of COVID-19 stimulus or not. At the same time, there has been some work at the committee level on reauthorization. So the FAST Act is up this year. I doubt if it's going to be renewed as is. Probably go to the continuing resolution to extend the existing a law for an indeterminate amount of time. So obviously the big issue with the legislative update right now is the pending election in November. Could affect both composition of Congress as well as administration. And importantly for us, the composition of the Arizona legislature may change dramatically. It may change a small amount, may not change at all. Who knows? So we're really waiting until the outcome of the election cycles in November so we understand who legislative leadership is. Despite the uncertainty with the election cycle underway, we are having conversations with certain legislators to make sure those lines of communications are open. We've had conversations with Senator Livingston, who's this past legislative session was chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. We don't know who the House Transportation Committee, Noel Campbell, did not run for re-election this year, so he will not be a player in the legislature coming forward. He was chair of the House Transportation Committee. So we'll continue to monitor the situation. Our legislative consultants, Dana Paschke and John McDonald, have done a great job in helping us navigate the potential changes in the legislature. They're also helping us work through some of these policy questions that we're putting together too. And so very thankful for that. We continue to work with trying to get the state to entertain the increase in a gas tax or some alternative method to fund the Arizona Highway User Revenue Fund. That's been a key effort that we've had going for the last couple of years. Obviously, the state needs a significant amount of money to maintain the state highway system across the entire state. And outside of Maricopa County, as exists today, there's not any money for expansion projects. So once again, the state is slowly running the situation. They're not going to have any money for hardly any projects moving forward. So it's something that at some point the state is going to have to take this on and increase revenues going into Arizona Highway User Revenue Fund. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from our committee members? All right, well, we will all eagerly await election results to know what to expect. Well, I don't know if that will tell us what to expect, but at least a little bit of useful information. Right. We next move to item number 5, which is future agenda items. Are there any requests by the membership for items on future agendas? Number 6, announcements from the membership. Does anyone have an announcement to share? Wonderful. Well, again, congratulations to all our recently re-elected members. Business is now concluded and the meeting is adjourned.